like obviously you have to have a basic skill level, right? You can't play AAA unless you can skate to a certain level and stuff, or junior, pro, and all that kind of stuff. So you got to have a basic skill level, which skating, shooting, passing, and all that stuff, like basic. And then after that, what's going to help you? Because it's easy to just say work on your skating and all that kind of stuff. Those are the attributes that you just base level need to have.
Yeah, that's par
But
for
what
the
are
course.
what are other things that and this is talking to scouts and stuff like this is basically me talking to scouts and stuff, things that we like and they like. So one of the first things that after the basic skill level that separates people from getting noticed, drafted, or their coach really liking them and stuff like that, or being used in useful situations and stuff like that is number one would be your compete level. Okay, and that's used loosely sometimes, right? Like, what is that? So, anyways, I just put like your effort, but then your second effort. So, a lot of times you'll see guys like really battling for that puck, or like just watching a kid last night in a corner that it was like he was going as hard as most people do, but then it was like he gave that extra push and he drove that puck through that pile. That's like that second effort. Like you could have just did effort, but it's that second effort where it's like, no, I'm getting through this thing. I'm determined. I'm going to get that through. And having that play after play after play is like what I call compete, right? That's one of the competes. It's that second effort. It's but with the compete, it would be what I call pushback. So it's easy to compete when, or easier to compete when things are, when you're playing equal or less. But when you look at guys that have that pushback, so using a quote from Steve Ott, we were talking here, and then I heard it from Theo Fleury the other day. Just two different ways of saying it, but it was like there's a high percentage of the players that are bluffers.
Yeah,
right,
for sure.
So that's what I'm talking about. Completing that pushback is like when it comes down to competing, like some guys will compete to a certain point where you take like a Theo Fleury or Steve Ott. Well, Steve wasn't the biggest guy either. That's how our conversation started. I said, what was the thing that, like, you not being the biggest guy in the world, what was it that separated you from and being like a rat and like almost a tough guy, like a middleweight, but like a gritty Brad Marchand type of guy. But and he said, like, for him it was like, I knew that 90% of the guys I played with would bluff. So guys were toughened to a point, but he would actually do something serious to you if need be, or for the fun of it. So if you're coming at me 6 inches taller and you're gonna whatever try to run me, you'd probably have a stick coming through your head. And he wouldn't bluff that. If he said he was going to do it, he would do it. And that was Theo Fleury too, right? It was like a 5-foot little guy. That's how he survived. He was obviously, that base skill level was there and plus to play in the NHL, but that compete level was off the charts that only a small percentage would have. So no one ever scared them because they would do whatever they had to do. So it was that pushback. If you push me, I'll push you back even harder, even though the size wasn't there. So that's one of the things, like, and I would agree with that. Like, especially now watching the amount of junior hockey I'm watching now is like, there's a lot of bluffers that talk and chirp and say they're going to do something, or they're going to talk about, yeah, whatever, I'll straighten out, whatever, and then they never do it because it's not necessarily necessary. But the guys that do, like when Arbor Jack-I played in the OHL last year, he wasn't bluffing. Maybe he was sometimes, but no one ever bought that he was bluffing. So that compete level, and it's not about beating people up.
I was going to get into that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that, but it's like, but it is that. It's a huge part because that's where a lot of guys back away, is when it gets physically demanding, right? So if you're like a skilled player, like a really skilled player, that's you're not a tough guy, let's call it. It's you this is what I'm talking about, is that pushback is still that you're going to go through that wall and still continue to play your game as hard as you did as if it was an easier game.
Yeah.
I
yeah, a couple things on that. I think the first, talking about it in terms of, when you talk about compete in terms of being the tough guy kind of thing, I think it's just the easiest way to give the example because it's so obvious what you're talking about. So when you're talking about the bluff part, like when you're talking about guys bluff, I think
Uh,
the easiest example of that is the
the
fight.
easiest one that
Yeah,
comes to your mind.
yeah. I'm not saying there aren't others, but my point
Yeah.
being, I remember coming to that realization, and you told me the story way later, but I remember coming to that realization my first junior camp because I was when I got into my first hockey fight, and I went and fought the guy that was supposed to be like the tough guy because I saw nobody would do it. I was like, nobody's fighting this guy, and he was like yapping the bench, and like no one was doing anything. So I went and I did it, and the guy beat me up, but I did fine. Like he won the fight. It was my first black eye, which I thought was cool. I think I've said that before.
Yeah.
But I did fine. And I remember walking out after just like that was like the toughest guy, you know? And you start to realize when you play that guys do a lot of yapping. And when you mentioned a guy like Steve Ott or Theo Fleury, how they weren't scared, I would bet that they would still be scared or have like a bit of that fear, that nervous energy, but they just would do it anyways.
They face fear.
Yeah. And I think that's where the difference is because, and that plays into kind of the next part talking about just how you learn to compete and give a second effort is you do things despite having the fear or you're tired or whatever, you just do things anyways. And I remember with the easiest example again is fighting is because whenever you go to get into a confrontational situation where there's going to be like physical violence, you're a human. So you're going to be nervous about it. Like you're going to be scared of what's going to happen to a certain degree, fearful, whatever the word is that you want to fill in. There's going to be something in you that is you're on guard, and that on guard feeling can manifest as fear or whatever it is. But you'd go and just do it anyways, and that is where guys make the separation, right? So when it comes to a fight, if you're going to stand in there and potentially get your head knocked off by somebody that's stronger than you, like that takes a certain level of a certain amount of balls to be able to do that. And a lot of guys will say they're going to do it, but they won't actually. And if you can call people on their bluffs, you can win a lot of battles that way, not just in the fighting sense, but when it's a battle in the corner or when you're tired at the end of a shift. If you're just willing to push it that extra step, that one step further, you're just willing to go there when other guys aren't willing to do that, then you're going to be the one coming out on top in more situations. It's not just fighting, you know?
No, it's not just fighting. Like it's the goal scorer that needs to get his ass to the net to score goals. And the bluffing part is like some guys will do it when they know that they're playing a game where it's getting to the net, they get a little bit of a lean or they get a little bit of a push. But it's when you're going against guys that are back checking you hard or a guy that's boxing you out hard and you're getting a stick and to get to that net actually hurts or it's not comfortable, we'll say, then those are the guys. Is what I'm talking about. Is that compete level becomes okay. It's being the winger going into that corner with a D that he's gonna like back in my days Hatchers or Tenortis, guys like that they're gonna punish you buka boom, that are just gonna beat your head in as you go into that corner. And you've got to do that 30 times a night. That compete is going to be, well, it doesn't matter. If it's 31, I'm going 31. I'm going to come out every single time, or I refuse to back down. It's the defenseman knowing that you have Tom Wilson coming down on you and not finding a way to take the easy way. And it's like making that hard play, taking that hit to move the puck out and stuff like that. That's because there's a lot of ways to fake the game, right? Like you can go in a corner real hard. Like, and I can see it. I can see when fear comes into guys, or when they don't want. Well, I guess it's fear. They don't want to go into that battle because they go into, like, say it's a winger going to a corner real hard, but then they look at the number on the back and they go, well, it's just not as hard as they usually go, or they don't finish that check as hard as they usually do. That's bluffing. You're picking and choosing, right? So you take some guys that just do that against any person at all time, and that's what that small percentage does that.
Yeah, and I think maybe to give a not physical example, if you're a guy that is supposed to be the goal scorer, it's wanting to be the guy who has to do the job. So that's the blaming, it's someone else's fault that we didn't score. Or when it's like the big moment in the big game, you're the guy that it's on you and you want it to be on you to make a difference in that moment, as opposed to, well, my winger was no good or my whoever else didn't do it. Like that little bit of blaming stuff, I think that's an element of that can be an element of the compete quality also. It's like if you're a competitive person and you're willing to give that second, third effort, then it's your responsibility. And you wanting it to be that it's your responsibility. You wanting that as a part of your game Like, I think that's an important part of it too. And it has nothing to do with being physical. It's like you want to go and be the difference maker. Like, that is an element of that compete thing. Like, you're going to go do what it takes to be the guy that gets the goal or makes the play or keeps the puck in at the blue line or whatever it is to make it work when the game's tight and it's a big moment. I think that's another element of it too. Has nothing to do with being physical at all. It's just like you have that mentality, right? And I think a guy like Crosby is the best example of that I can think of. Where it's just
great example.
It doesn't matter what part of the game you're talking about, whether it's win a face-off, block a shot, make a play to keep the puck in, get into a fight, finish a hit, like get in somebody's way, go to the net, make it in an uncomfortable situation, whatever color you want to paint it. He's a guy that will do that. And I think he's probably the best example of that. And my last thing with the compete, because I think it's important, is that's something you can train. Like, you can make that a skill, like giving a second and third effort. If you can be consciously aware of it, and you can tell yourself in your head when you're in practice or when you're in your games, like you make that a focus. Like, I'm going to make sure I give a second effort on the back check or a second effort if I lose a battle or whatever it is. That was something that I never did. I never thought of it at the time as a thing to do. And it's something that was definitely called into question on me by coaches or by my dad mostly. But coaches and stuff too would say that, like, I don't see that you're battling. Like, it doesn't look like you want to win the puck and that kind of thing. And it never occurred to me to try to train it like I would any other skill, to think about it in practice, to try to do that when I have the moment when we're doing a battle drill. Like, that never occurred to me to try to practice that to make it better. But I really believe you can sharpen that just like anything else.
Yeah, you got to be aware of it, right?
Yeah.
If you're not aware of it, you